I am here now with Rosie Allen, and for those of you who don't know Rosie Allen, and I would be surprised if you didn't because she is fabulous, Rosie and I started out together a million years ago
A million
at
and one.
KNBR Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Rosie,
Yes.
this is such a
Yes.
treat for me to see you. We can catch up, find out
Of
what
course,
you're doing.
Of course.
But when I started at KNBR Radio, I was a volunteer for Jane Morrison, whom you know very well.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Another
yes.
legend in radio.
I hope we're going to interview her.
And do you remember what you were doing?
What was I doing? Oh, I
Ron
was
Fell.
in programming.
Right.
I was the secretary to the program director, who's Ron Fell. And Ron Fell and I started in 1969, and I can say this, at KNEW Radio. And Ron was the music director, and I was the program director's secretary. So we started out as just friends. And the program director, ironically, was Ron Reynolds, who later went to KCBS and had a very long career there. And I believe he retired from there. Phenomenal man, love him. And he hired me to do like payroll and all of the things that secretaries do.
But one of the things that I know about you and about me was we started in radio at a time when there were not a lot of role models for women.
Not at all.
And hardly any.
Yes.
And so for me, I was lucky because Jane Morrison took a chance on me.
Mm-hmm.
Take me back before that. What was your drive to get into radio? What was your path?
I was living in New York before long story short, I was in the Army. I joined the Army when I was 18.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, I was in the Army for 3 years. Okay, so then I got out of the Army. I had this unfortunate romance in New York City, and I lived in New York for 8 years. And I worked for American Home Products Corporation, American Leprosy Missions, all the Americans, ending up at American Broadcasting. How do you go from there to there? But ironically, the bad relationship broke up in 1968 or so. And so my family's in California, so I moved back home to Mama at the age of 25, I think. And I can say that now because everybody knows that this is a retirement video. No. At the age of 25, I moved back to California. And I had worked in personnel in New York at American Home Products, and it was a pretty good job. So I went on a job interview at a personnel agency, which is how we got jobs then. We didn't just go in and apply like we do online now. So I was sent to the radio station, met with Ron. I had skills, mad skills. I could type on a typewriter that wasn't electric, a manual typewriter. I mean, so I had great fingers. And actually, I was pretty good because I'd worked in personnel. So I had the skills that I needed. So then I started working with Ron, for Ron. And he was so nice. He was a lovely man to work for and with. I was doing payroll for the guys who were on the air. Names that you'll remember: Steve Davis,
Mm-hmm.
Ray Taliaferro. Those guys were there then. So I looked at their payroll that I filled out every week. They were making $500, $600, $700 a week. I, on the other hand, was earning $180, and I thought there has to be a way for me to catch up to these guys. So I had a talk with Ron, and I said I want to earn the kind of money that they're earning in 1969, which was $700. So he said, okay, start working on your skills, learn what you can from the bottom up, and so that's what I did.
And how did you do that? Did you go back to school or did you learn on the job?
I learned on the job. I would go and I would talk to the guys because they didn't see me as a particular threat because, again, like you said, no women were on the air, so it wasn't like I was taking their jobs. So they would give me all the information, tell me all the secrets, and there were secrets, of how to do this. And so I learned from there. And then I would sit and practice and I would read out loud to myself and in a corner in the dark. And that's how it all started.
Would you get people to work on your tapes and then you'd submit those tapes?
I didn't do that until I got to KNBR, which is where we met. I stayed at KNEW until about 1972. Ron fell, the music director, went to KNBR, became program director, hired me because of my mad skills and personnel and all of that. And so it was there that I started doing on-air work. And because Ron was a good guy, he said, yeah, continue learning. And so I did. I just kept on doing the basics. And you and I ended up doing a show together Remember when they had KNAI, that NBC hybrid, and I don't know how you got there.
It was an all-news
station. It was all news well before its time. And that was probably 75,
it was
maybe?
on the FM side.
Yes.
And so we were both at KNBR and KNAI now.
Yes.
And we were disc jockeys.
Yes.
And news announcers.
Yes.
Rip and read.
On the weekend.
That's a phrase nobody knows anymore. Rip and read.
No, because nobody, there was nothing to rip now. You rip your iPad out and you say, but yeah, rip and read, because we had the old UPI and Associated Press machines that spewed out paper endlessly, and made a horrible sound. And you just rip it off and slice it with your ruler and read it, and that's how we did it.
And while you were practicing your reading, my job was to replace the ribbons on those rip and reads. So that's and sharpen pencils. But when you finally submitted a tape to somebody had to say yes to you. Yes, I'll put you on the air. Do you remember that?
I think that person was Alan Hotlin, because I think he was the first one who actually put me on the air. And I think they put us on the air because KNAI, they didn't expect it to be very successful.
Well, and no one wanted to work weekends.
And nobody wanted to work weekends. So how lucky are we?
I know.
We were blessed, because actually it gave us a chance to hone our skills.
And you did the Saturday night shift.
Exactly. We shared the weekends.
And that was overnight.
Yes, it was.
And what time did you start that shift?
I think it was something like 8 or 9. And then I would get off at like 5 in the morning. I mean, it's like a full 8-hour shift.
And that was like after working all week at your secretarial job with all those mad skills. And the pay increase was substantial.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, nothing really. It was like a shift fee or something. I can't even remember.
It was double.
So minuscule.
A secretarial fee was $100 for the week.
Okay.
And the after wage was $200.
I don't remember. It's been so long.
But also, do you remember what happened? We had somebody come in and say that women didn't belong on the air.
They always said that. When you and I were working together when we got started, they had so little respect for women that they would allow us to work 8 hours on the air, not caring what it sounded like. And let's face it, we were learning, so we weren't fabulous.
We were happy though.
But we were happy. And the gift that they didn't realize they were giving us is the skills, the technique, the technology then, and then it was the learning process.
And it was on the resume.
And it was on the resume. And we could take that, as you did, and go to a...
And you did.
Yeah, I did.
You went from KNVR to a whole other venue.
I did. I went to ABC, from NBC to ABC, which was like a huge step up. Went to KSFX, Rockin' Stereo, working with some fabulous people, Tommy Saunders, and just great people on the air. And then I met my NABIT brothers and sisters, and a lot of them became my friends. I worked there as a news and public affairs director, where I continued to hone my news skills. That's when I really learned how to rip and read and write news as well. So everything I learned on the job. When I was in college, I was majoring in psychology. And I actually used it because some of the people in broadcasting are truly nuts. And so it was a skill that I was able to use as well. But KSFX was really good. It was fun. It was interesting. It was my first encounter with people in radio who really did use drugs, because you hear about it, but you don't think about it. And they worked successfully every day. But it's that FM image was really a true image, because this was in the mid to late 70s, and there was a lot going on in broadcasting.
How long were you there?
I was at KSFX from 1976 to about 1982, when they sold, when ABC sold KSFX. And then I went, well, no, they didn't sell it. They changed the name to KGO-FM. Changed the name to KGO-FM, and then I started doing news on Sex Talk. Sex Talk was a show with Don Chamberlain, who also had, coincidentally, done California Girls.
I missed that show, darn it.
It was a great show. Don did California Girls at KNEW when I was there. I've forgotten about that. And then he translated it to KGO-FM, and I did news on his show. And people to this day 35 years later, relate to that show. Still remember that show and ask me, didn't you do Sex Talk with Don Chamberlain on? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you became the biggest draw in the afternoon
I don't
on
know
radio.
how that happened.
That it was just a phenomenal career. It was so amazing to me that we got to work at this one place together as secretaries, and then we wound up in the same building at the same company so many years later. So talk about your KGO days with all your afternoon. It's just amazing to me.
Well, it was amazing to me too, because I never, in my wildest imaginations, did I ever think that I would end up at the #1 station and practically on the West Coast as the afternoon news anchor. It was never anything that I even envisioned. What happened was Jan Black, who was the afternoon news anchor with Ed Baxter, failed to renew her contract for whatever reason. I had been, jump back for just a second, ABC sold the FM station. So those of us who were at KSFX and KGO-FM weren't employed. So I went to KGO AM as a part-time reporter. Never reported in my life, so I wasn't that great. But Bruce Kamen, who was the news director, liked me, and he had listened to me on Sex Talk, and he said, one of these days I'm going to get you a job, girl. So I listened and waited. So filled in, doing fill-in news, and etc. So one day I was at home. It was on a Friday, and Bruce had this really irascible voice. He said, "You want a job?" And I said, "Okay, sure. What do you want me to do?" So he said, "I want you to meet me at the station tomorrow morning." This was a Saturday. So I'm going into the station on Saturday to meet him. And I'm like, okay. So I go in to meet him, and he said, "If you sign this contract, you're going to be the new afternoon news anchor on KGO."
Just like that?
Just like that. And I'm completely lost for words, flummoxed, whatever you say. And I said, well, and I'm going to do this because, and how am I going to do this? What are you going to do with Jan? I had 1,000 questions. So he said, Jan failed to renew her contract. And we want you to work with Ed Baxter because you get along with him.
That's a good reason.
No, he said, you guys sound really great together. I'd done some fill-in with Ed. And I didn't realize that I was in the running with a woman by the name of Abby Goldman, who I thought was phenomenal. But they chose me over Abby Goldman, who I considered to be a real news person. Because I was always a hybrid. I always did paperwork. I did personnel. I did public affairs and news directing. So I didn't think of myself as a true news person. And I did news on Sex Talk. I mean, news people don't do that. You know, you're a news person, you're a news person, you're a news person. I was a hybrid. So I'm thinking all of these things on this day, on this Saturday, and I'm saying, what am I going to do? So I said, okay. And I was at work I signed my contract, fool that I was, didn't realize that it was just like bottom line contract. But who knew? I had no job then, so it didn't really matter. Things you learn later. Check that one. Put that in the box to check for later. But anyway, so the following Monday I was on the air.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I was terrified because this was like the big time. This is the top of the line in this market. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Were you just dizzy when you had that first afternoon, the first few moments?
Well, the first thing that happened to me is I was so stressed that I caught a cold.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, it was a really horrific cold, the first one. And I would get over it. So I sounded like crap. I would get over it. As soon as I got over that one, I caught another cold. And it was not a good beginning.
It was a major life change, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really was.
But you were there forever.
I was there. I anchored the afternoon news from 1984 to 2009. So that's 25 years.
That is a glorious career.
Yeah. That was great. It was great. It was nonstop. Loved it, every minute of it.
Your determination is amazing, because the other piece of this that people forget about is there was a lot of prejudice.
Oh, yeah.
That we have both endured.
Oh, yes.
And
first being women and then being an African American woman,
yeah.
There's no comparison.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, what's really interesting for me is I know I had a couple of instances. It isn't always overt.
Mm-hmm.
It's often behind the scenes. It's the perception. It was always the perception that black people can't read, black people can't write, and that's something that I faced. And the gift for me was that I could. I had a good education. I was well spoken. My family didn't come from a family that didn't speak correct English. In fact, my mother was always saying, if you're going to say it, if it's worth saying, it's worth saying right. And so I learned well. I grew up in Denver. The Denver public schools are the best schools, or were the best schools when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, because you had a true academic basis. And I think that's true of anyone who grew up and was raised in that era, because it was really reading, writing, and arithmetic, and grammar and spelling and all of those things that you had to learn. And so because of that, I had a good background. So I couldn't be accused of not being able to read and write, but there was always the perception. And my most interesting story of being at KGO is I was there for a couple of years, and I had really settled in with Ed Baxter, who, by the way, taught me a tremendous amount, so I have to go back to that. And I was out on a personal appearance. All of the anchors and the talk show hosts were at a Tapestry and Talent in San Jose. And we were all in a row at a table, and we were signing autographs, and this lady walked up, and I was the only woman there. I was always the only woman there, because there was not another woman on the air at KGO with my profile. So this lady walked up to me, and she said, "Can you tell me where I can find Rosie Allen?" And I thought maybe she's kidding, because we did have a lot of publicity shots, etc. And I raised my hand. I said, "Here I am." She said, "No, you're not Rosie Allen. Rosie Allen's not black."
She did not.
She did. No, but I wasn't offended. She didn't know. And I took that as a compliment, because sometimes people think that if you're black, African American, you sound a certain way. So I said, "Thank you."
What was her reaction?
She freaked out. She freaked completely out. I said, "No, it's okay." And I hope I made her comfortable, because I wasn't offended at all.
That's that psychology you're using right now.
And I was not offended at all. No, I truly was not offended. I have been offended, as in one of the times when a very well-known, and I don't think this is the part where you get to be a woman. I was doing a live shot on the air, and this is many years into my career with Ed, and we did the Curathon at KGO. And Ed was upstairs, I was downstairs in the broadcast center, and doing a live on-air piece. Had a microphone in my hand with my facing the engineer, and I'm talking on the air live. Someone walked up behind me and grabbed a whole handful of butt cheek. Seriously, this was a very well-known talk show host who shall go unnamed, because he's not dead yet, and grabbed a handful. And it was the most power that I'd ever had, because I had the power at that moment to have him fired, even though he was very high profile. But I chose not to, because I asked for something else and I got it. And because it wasn't about being black, and it wasn't about anything but being disrespected as a woman, because you would never have done that to a man.
You have had such an amazing career in radio, but you also did television.
I did.
I got to work with you.
Yes,
Lucky me.
I did. About 15 years into my radio career, I was a little antsy and I wanted to do something else, and it was contract time. Go back to when I was talking about contract and negotiating, and I had a really great attorney, and he helped me to negotiate a contract which allowed me to do television and radio at the same time. And so I did. I was co-host of Marketplace, which was a fabulous show that ran for about 10 years on ABC, which was wonderful. And it was my foray into television, and I really enjoyed it. But what I learned was that television was not my medium. I was a total radio person, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you're nice looking. You should be on TV," but TV is different, and you have to have a feel for it. And while I was okay with it, it was fun, it was interesting. I just discovered it wasn't my medium.
I thought you were terrific.
Yeah.
And you and I got to co-host some programs together,
Yes.
so that was a joy for me. But you thought that radio was your area, huh?
Yeah, I kind of.
What was it about it?
Radio was free form. Television, you're kind of in a box.
You are.
You're
true.
kind of, and you're at the mercy of the people who write for television. I mean, unless you write your own pieces, and that's very difficult when you have a real full-time job. As a news anchor, you can't write all of the pieces. It's just not possible because there's so much that happens on a daily basis. And so for me, television was kind of an impediment because I'm, as you can tell, kind of free-form, and I like to...
Unconstrained.
So what I learned was that radio was my medium, and I enjoyed it, and I just continued to enjoy it.
You've had such a great, so many things have gone so well for you and so right.
I agree.
And now you are transitioning to another.
The nonprofit world, which is my time to give back. As you say, much has been given to me, much has been offered to me, and I've taken advantage of it, and I've tried to work as well and as hard as I possibly can. I'm a hard worker, and I recognize that. So what I've done since I've been transitioning from the full-time work world is I became one of the founding members of a group called Friends of Faith. Faith Fancher was a local news anchor, as you well know, who had breast cancer. She died of breast cancer in 2003. She started the organization in '97 when she was first diagnosed. And so we've been carrying on her mission since the time that she passed away. Her whole focus was trying to help women who had no insurance, and some men, by the way, because we've been creating services for men over the last few years with breast cancer, because it apparently is becoming more prevalent among men. So that's what I've been doing, producing The Walk for the last 3 years, and it's a phenomenal new adventure for me.
How many people show up for that? Because I see the advertising everywhere.
A lot.
It's a big
and I'm
deal.
glad. It's a big deal. In fact, we're trying to replace Komen in the Bay Area, and I think we will, because since they're dropping out next year, it's going to be our 10th walk.
And it happens every year at?
Happens every year at Lake Merritt in August, around Faith's birthday, which was August 23rd. So we try to have it on that weekend or the weekend before. So this year it's August 17th. 2013.
Now, before I let you go, final thoughts for people out there who are looking at you. I mean, you're just this perfect picture of success. We talked about hard work being part of the drive, but there's so many things that go into that. So what's your advice for young people getting into this industry nowadays? It's very different.
Well, first of all, it is very different. It's hard for me to give advice because it is so different. Not only is it different in terms of the people who own broadcasting companies, but it's different in terms of the technology, the way media is done. You have so many bloggers, you have podcasting, you have areas of the media that are just not something that those of us who are in my time of career have a clear picture or clear understanding of. Yes, I understand new media, but I don't know how to tell someone to do that, how to get in. What I can tell you is decide what you want to do, persevere, get in the door in any way that you can, which is actually what we did. So yes, in terms of that, I do have advice, but it's different. It's just a different world.
You have to have a much higher skill set.
Your skill set has to be tremendous, really. Although, you know, you can learn on the job, but you have to have some form of education, and you can't just jump in the way we did.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be able to sit here and talk with you and
my dear,
and learn about things I never knew about you.
I should interview you because we know there are things about you.
We'll keep that for another day. Rosie Allen, awesome Rosie Allen, pleasure to have you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.